The Zephyrian patrol ship Talon's Edge drifted silently through the debris field that had once been the human colony of New Haven. Captain Vextar's 4 eyes scanned the wreckage with practiced efficiency, his scaled hands dancing across the sensor controls. 3 months had passed since their fleet had reduced this backwater settlement to cosmic dust. Yet something kept drawing salvage teams back to this particular sector. "Sir, we're detecting another anomaly in Grid 77 Alpha," reported Lieutenant Kessera, her tentacles twitching with nervous energy. "It's the same biosignature we've been tracking for weeks." Vextar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The Galactic Coalition had been systematic in their conquest of human space. These primitive bipeds, with their stubborn refusal to submit, had proven more troublesome than anticipated. But their technology was laughably inferior. The fact that anything could have survived the orbital bombardment was impossible, yet here they were, chasing ghosts through asteroid fields. "Deploy the scanner drones," he ordered. "If there's a survivor pod out there, I want it found and eliminated." The High Command was very clear about leaving no witnesses. The sleek metallic drones launched from the ship's belly, their sensors piercing through the twisted metal and frozen atmosphere that clung to the larger debris pieces. Vextar had been part of 17 planetary subjugations, and humans had surprised him more than any other species. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, refusing to surrender even when facing impossible odds. 20 minutes later, the drones transmitted back imagery that made Vextar's blood run cold. Nestled within the hollow shell of what had been a residential complex, a small figure moved among makeshift shelters. The thermal reading was unmistakably human, but the size indicated a juvenile. A child had somehow survived 3 months in the vacuum of space. "Impossible," Kessera whispered, her voice barely audible through the ship's communication system. "No life support, no atmosphere, no sustainable heat source. How is this creature still alive?" Through the drone's camera, they watched as the small figure emerged from behind a twisted beam of metal. She appeared to be no more than 12 standard years old, with pale skin and dark hair that floated freely in the zero gravity. But what made Vextar's scales ripple with unease was the casual way she moved through the debris field. As if the hostile environment was no more challenging than a playground, the girl seemed to sense the drone's presence, turning her head directly toward the camera. Her eyes were a piercing blue that seemed to look right through the lens and into Vextar's soul. She raised one small hand and waved, a gesture so innocent and human that it sent chills down his spine. "Should we retrieve her, sir?" Kessera asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Vextar considered his options. Coalition protocol was clear about human survivors, but this was no ordinary situation. A child who could survive in space without life support was either evidence of human technological advancement they hadn't accounted for, or something far more dangerous. His tactical training told him to eliminate the threat immediately, but his scientific curiosity demanded answers. "Bring her aboard," he decided, "but maintain full quarantine protocols. I want a complete bioscan and interrogation before we report this to command." The retrieval operation took less than an hour. The girl offered no resistance as the mechanical arms guided her into the ship's quarantine bay. She seemed almost amused by the entire process, smiling at the cameras and making what appeared to be playful gestures at the automated systems. In the quarantine chamber, separated by 3 layers of reinforced transparent aluminum, Vextar got his first close look at the impossible survivor. She sat cross-legged on the examination table, swinging her feet like any normal child might. Her clothes were torn and dirty, but showed no signs of the radiation exposure or decompression damage that should have killed her within minutes of the attack. "Can you understand me?" Vextar spoke through the translation matrix, his words converted into standard galactic common. The girl tilted her head thoughtfully, then nodded. "You're the ones who killed my family," she said in perfect Zephyrian, her voice carrying an odd echo that made the ship's hull vibrate slightly. "You're the ones who destroyed my home." Vextar's scales stood on end. No human had ever mastered Zephyrian pronunciation, let alone with such fluency. "How do you know our language?" "I've been listening," she replied simply. "Your patrols have been very talkative these past few months. Did you know that Lieutenant Kessera is worried about her egg clutch on Zephyr Prime, and that you've been having nightmares about the screaming children on Terran Station 7? The bridge fell silent. Those were private communications, encrypted on frequencies no human technology could decode. Kesra's breathing apparatus made sharp clicking sounds as her stress levels spiked. "What are you?" Vextar demanded, his voice losing its professional composure. The girl smiled, and for a moment her blue eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "I'm what you made me," she said softly. "When your bombs fell, when the fire consumed everything I loved, something changed. Something awakened." She stood up from the examination table and placed her small hand against the quarantine barrier. Where her palm touched the transparent aluminum, hairline cracks began to spread outward like a spider web. "You wanted to study human resilience," she continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that made the ship's systems fluctuate. "You wanted to understand why we never surrender, why we fight even when hope is gone. Congratulations, Captain Vextar. You're about to get a very personal demonstration." The quarantine barrier shattered, alarms began blaring throughout the ship as the girl stepped through the wreckage of what had been the most secure containment system in the Zephyrian fleet. Emergency blast doors slammed shut, but her small fist punched through 3 inches of battle-grade steel, as if it were paper. "Alert High Command!" Vextar screamed at his communications officer. "Tell them we have a Class X threat situation. Tell them the humans are more dangerous than we ever imagined." But even as he spoke, he realized it might already be too late. The girl was no longer just walking toward the bridge. She was floating, her feet inches off the deck, and the very air around her shimmered with energy that their sensors couldn't classify. The war was about to change, and humanity had just revealed its most terrifying weapon, a child with nothing left to lose. The bridge of the Talon's edge became a chaos of sparking consoles and screaming alarms as the girl moved through the ship like a force of nature. Emergency lighting bathed everything in angry red as Captain Vextar watched his crew panic around him. 3 of his best security officers lay unconscious in the corridor outside the bridge, their weapons twisted into abstract sculptures of melted metal. "Sir, she's not using any technology we can detect," reported the sensor operator, his voice shaking. "No energy weapons, no armor, no external devices. The reading suggests she's somehow manipulating matter at the molecular level." Lieutenant Kesra's tentacles writhed frantically as she tried to coordinate the ship's defenses. "All blast doors are failing, Captain. She's not forcing them open, she's just changing them. The metal becomes something else when she touches it." The bridge doors, 5 inches of reinforced titanium steel composite, began to glow with soft blue light. The metal didn't melt or tear, it simply ceased to be solid, flowing like water around a small figure who stepped through as if walking through mist. Up close, the girl looked even more impossible. Her skin had taken on a faint luminescence, and her eyes now held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When she spoke, her voice resonated with frequencies that made the ship's hull sing like a tuning fork. "Hello, Captain," she said, floating gently above the deck plates. "My name is Sarah Chen. I was 11 years old when you murdered my parents. I've had 3 months to think about that." Vexitar's hand hovered over his sidearm, though he suspected it would be useless. "What did the humans do to you? What kind of experiment were they running?" Sarah laughed, a sound like wind chimes mixed with breaking glass. "They didn't do anything to me, you did. When your orbital cannons fired, when the atmosphere burned away and the cold of space embraced me, I should have died like everyone else. But I didn't want to die, Captain. I wanted to live long enough to make you pay." She gestured toward the main view screen, and it activated without any input from the crew. Images flashed across the display, scenes from the attack on New Haven recorded by Zephyrian gun cameras. Children running in terror, families vaporized in microseconds, an entire world reduced to rubble. "Do you know what happened in that moment?" Sarah asked, her small form now radiating energy that made the air shimmer. "When I watched my mother push me into that emergency shelter before the ceiling collapsed on her, when I felt my little brother's hand go cold in mine, something inside humanity's genetic code activated, something your scientists never accounted for." The ship's computer began speaking in a mechanical voice. "Warning. Quantum field fluctuations detected. Reality matrix destabilizing. Recommend immediate evacuation." Vextar had heard reports from other worlds, whispered rumors that Command always denied. Stories of humans developing impossible abilities under extreme stress, of children who could survive in vacuum, of soldiers who could tear through battle armor with their bare hands. The High Command had dismissed such tales as primitive propaganda, designed to demoralize coalition forces. The human genome carries dormant sequences, Sarah continued, floating closer to the captain's chair. Evolutionary potential locked away since before your species learned to use fire. Most humans live their entire lives without activating even a fraction of these capabilities. But extreme trauma, the kind of loss that should destroy a mind completely, that can trigger an awakening. She held up her hand, and Vextar watched in horror as reality bent around her fingers. The molecules in the air began to reorganize themselves, forming complex patterns of light and matter that his sensors couldn't analyze. I spent 3 months learning what I could do, Sarah said, her voice now carrying the weight of cosmic forces. I discovered that I could survive without oxygen, that cold couldn't touch me, that the radiation from your bombs only made me stronger. I learned to hear your communications across light years of space, to feel the quantum signatures of every ship in your fleet. The ship's weapon systems activated without any command input, turrets swiveling to target empty space. But as they watched the tactical display, dozens of red dots appeared, Zephyrian patrol ships all within firing range of the Talon's edge. I've been calling them here, Sarah explained calmly. Every ship that participated in the destruction of New Haven. I wanted them all to witness what comes next. You're just one child, Kesra whispered, her translator struggling with the harmonics in Sarah's voice. Even with these impossible abilities, you can't fight an entire fleet. Sarah turned those galaxy-deep eyes toward the lieutenant and smiled with infinite sadness. You still don't understand. I'm not fighting your fleet, Lieutenant. I'm going to show them what humanity becomes when you take everything from us. The girl raised both hands, and every screen on the bridge displayed the same image, the tactical overview of local space. 27 Zephyrian ships hung motionless in formation, their crews probably as confused as Vextar about why they'd been drawn to this location. Watch carefully, Sarah said. I want you to carry this message back to your high command. Tell them that humanity has evolved beyond their comprehension. Tell them that for every child they've murdered, 100 more will awaken. Tell them that their war of extinction has become a war of transformation. She clenched her fists, and space itself seemed to respond. The quantum fields around the assembled fleet began to fluctuate wildly. Vexitar's sensors screamed warnings about reality distortions and temporal anomalies as the girl who had once been human reached out with forces that shouldn't exist. One by one, the Zephyrian ships began to change. Their hulls became transparent, revealing the terrified crews inside. Their weapon systems turned to crystalline sculptures. Their engines transformed into forests of metallic trees that bloomed with impossible flowers of pure energy. I'm not destroying them, Sarah explained, noting the captain's horrified expression. I'm showing them beauty they've never imagined. I'm teaching them that there are better ways to use the matter and energy they've been wasting on instruments of death. The transformation spread through the fleet like a benevolent infection. Ships that had been designed for conquest became works of art that sang with cosmic harmonies. Crews who had been trained for warfare found themselves overwhelmed by experiences of pure aesthetic wonder. Why? Vextar asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why show mercy to those who showed you none? Sarah descended until her feet touched the deck, her luminescence fading slightly. For a moment she looked like a normal child again, small and vulnerable and infinitely sad. Because someone has to break the cycle, she said simply. Because if we become monsters to fight monsters, then the monsters have already won. Because my parents taught me that even in the darkest moments, we choose who we become. She walked to the view screen and placed her hand against it, looking out at the transformed fleet. Tell your people what you've seen here, Captain. Tell them that humanity offers one final chance for peace. But also tell them this. If they refuse that offer, if they continue their war of extermination, then they'll face not just one awakened human, but millions. The ship shuddered as Sarah's presence began to fade, her form becoming translucent. I'm going home now, she said, back to the ruins of New Haven, to rebuild something better from the ashes. But I'll be listening, Captain. I'll always be listening. She vanished like morning mist, leaving behind only the impossible reality of a Zephyrian fleet transformed beyond recognition, and a message that would change the course of the war forever. High Admiral Zexthon of the Galactic Coalition Command stood before the assembled War Council, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the strategic planning chamber. Representatives from 12 different species occupied the circular amphitheater, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, hisses, and harmonics that the universal translators struggled to process. Counselors, Zexthon began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems. We face an unprecedented situation. Captain Vextar's report from the New Haven sector defies every scientific principle we understand. The holographic display above the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing the tactical recording from the Talon's edge. The assembled leaders watched in stunned silence as the impossible child transformed, an entire fleet with nothing more than willpower and quantum manipulation that shouldn't exist. Ambassador Quilrix, representing the crystalline Shardani collective, resonated with frequencies of disbelief. Respectfully, High Admiral, this recording must be fabricated. No biological entity can manipulate matter at the subatomic level without technological assistance. That was my first assumption as well, Zexthon replied, activating another display. However, we've received similar reports from 14 other sectors. Human children, seemingly ordinary juveniles, demonstrating abilities that violate the fundamental laws of physics. The room erupted in a cacophony of alarmed communications. The reptilian Vorthak delegate hissed aggressively, while the gaseous ethereal representative pulsed with concerned bioluminescence. Only the machine intelligence known as Unity 7 remained silent, its optical sensors focused intently on the data streams. How many? Asked General Morthak of the Brutish Confederation, his massive form leaning forward in his reinforced chair. How many of these awakened humans have been confirmed? Zexthon's mandibles clicked nervously. 47 verified encounters across Coalition space, each one demonstrating different but equally impossible abilities. Some appear to control gravity, others manipulate electromagnetic fields, and a few seem capable of existing in multiple locations simultaneously. He activated another series of recordings, a 10-year-old boy on Kepler Station who had walked through a bulkhead to rescue trapped civilians, a teenage girl on Europa base who had somehow convinced Coalition soldiers to lay down their weapons and help rebuild the city they'd been ordered to destroy, a group of human children who had collectively created a force field that protected an entire refugee camp from orbital bombardment. The pattern is consistent, Zexthon continued. Extreme trauma triggers these transformations, but unlike our projections suggested, the humans aren't becoming weapons. They're becoming something else entirely. Unity 7's mechanical voice cut through the chamber's ambient noise with surgical precision. Analysis indicates a fundamental error in our assessment of human psychological response patterns. Initial data suggested that sufficient pressure would result in species-wide capitulation. Current evidence demonstrates an adaptive mechanism we failed to anticipate. The Shardani ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with angry light. Adaptive mechanism? These creatures are violating the basic laws that govern reality itself. They should be contained, studied, and if necessary eliminated before they spread this contamination to other species. Contamination? The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once, causing every security system in the chamber to activate simultaneously. The air itself seemed to shimmer as a small figure materialized in the center of the chamber, standing calmly within the holographic display. Sarah Chen looked exactly as she had on the recording, but her presence filled the room with an energy that made the most advanced technological systems fluctuate wildly. She wore simple clothes, a faded t-shirt and worn jeans, but they seemed to exist in defiance of the chamber's environmental controls. "My apologies for interrupting," she said, her voice somehow reaching each delegate in their native language simultaneously, "but I thought it was time we had a direct conversation." Weapons materialized from hidden compartments, energy shields activated, and atmospheric alarms began screaming warnings about unauthorized life forms. Sarah stood unmoved in the center of the chaos, her expression patient and slightly sad. "I know you're frightened," she continued, raising her voice slightly to be heard over the alarms. "I know this situation is beyond your understanding, but I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you a choice." Zexthon's personal guard had surrounded the girl with plasma rifles charged and ready, but their target simply looked at him with those impossibly deep eyes. "Hi, Admiral. Would you mind asking your soldiers to lower their weapons? They won't hurt me, and I'd prefer not to demonstrate why." Something in her tone convinced him that compliance was the wisest course of action. He gestured for his guards to stand down, though they remained ready to act if needed. "How did you penetrate our security?" Unity 7 asked, its sensors running continuous scans that returned impossible readings. "The same way I've been monitoring your communications for the past 3 months," Sarah replied simply. "Quantum entanglement isn't limited by space or time when you understand how to manipulate the underlying matrix of reality. Every conversation you've had about humanity, every strategic plan, every decision to continue this war, I've been listening." The implications sent waves of alarm through the assembled delegates. If one human child could breach their most secure installations, monitor their classified communications, and appear anywhere at will, what could thousands of such beings accomplish? "What do you want?" Zexthon asked, his voice stripped of its earlier authority. Sarah walked slowly around the chamber, her presence causing holographic displays to fluctuate and shimmer. "I want you to understand what you've created. Every child you've orphaned, every parent you've killed, every world you've destroyed. You've been forging weapons more powerful than any fleet. But we're not the kind of weapons you expect." She stopped in front of the Shardani ambassador, whose crystalline form was resonating with barely controlled fear. "You call us contamination, Ambassador Quillrex. But contamination implies something foreign and harmful. We're something entirely different. We're evolution in action." The girl gestured, and the chamber's central display showed images of the transformed Zephyrian fleet. The ships now serving as mobile hospitals and refugee centers, their former crews working alongside human survivors to rebuild what had been destroyed. "This is what we do," Sarah explained. "We don't destroy our enemies, we transform them. We don't conquer worlds, we heal them. We don't spread death across the galaxy. We plant seeds of hope that bloom into something better." General Morthak slammed his massive fist against his chair's armrest. "Impossible. No species abandons its predatory instincts when given such power. You're trying to deceive us." Sarah turned those cosmic eyes toward the brutish general, and for a moment the air around him shimmered with the same blue light that had surrounded her on the ship. When it faded, Morthak was staring at his own hands in wonder, watching as the scars and calluses from a lifetime of warfare slowly healed. "I've just given you a gift, General," she said softly. "Your body no longer carries the pain of old battles. The arthritis in your joints is gone. The shrapnel fragments your doctors couldn't remove have been repaired, and the neural damage from combat stims has been reversed. Do you feel deceived?" The massive warrior flexed his fingers experimentally, his expression shifting from suspicion to amazement. "This is impossible." "Why would you heal an enemy?" "Because you're not my enemy," Sarah replied. "You're just someone who forgot there was another way to be strong." She turned back to address the full council. "Humanity is offering you a final chance for peace. Not surrender, not subjugation, but genuine partnership in building something better than this endless cycle of conquest and destruction. We can teach your species to access their own evolutionary potential, to become more than you ever imagined possible." Zexthon found his voice again. "And if we refuse?" Sarah's expression grew infinitely sad. "Then you'll discover what happens when you force an entire species to evolve beyond their physical limitations. We won't attack your fleets or invade your worlds, High Admiral. We'll simply ensure that every act of violence against innocent beings is met with immediate transformation of the aggressors." She began to fade, her form becoming translucent. "You have 7 standard days to consider our offer. After that, every military vessel that targets civilian populations will find itself converted into an instrument of healing. Every weapon designed to cause suffering will become a tool for creation. Every soldier who raises their hand against the defenseless will discover what it means to feel every life they've taken." As she vanished completely, her final words echoed through the chamber. "Choose wisely, counselors. Evolution is coming to the galaxy, whether you embrace it or not." The 7 days passed like a held breath across coalition space. In the highest levels of command, emergency sessions ran continuously as military leaders, scientists, and political advisors struggled to comprehend the implications of humanity's ultimatum. Field reports continued to stream in from across the war zone, each one more impossible than the last. Commander Yilves of the Outer Rim patrol vessel Destroyer's Pride stared at the tactical display with growing unease. Her orders were clear. Eliminate the human refugee convoy attempting to reach the neutral zone. 17 transport ships filled with civilians fleeing the destruction of their homeworld presented an easy target for her heavy cruiser's weapons. "Ma'am," reported her sensor operator, We're detecting unusual quantum signatures from the transport vessels. Energy readings are off the charts, but we can't identify the source. Through the viewport, Ylves could see the desperate human ships struggling with damaged engines and failing life support systems. Children pressed their faces against observation windows, their small hands leaving prints on the transparent aluminum as they watched the massive coalition warship approach. "Target their engines," she ordered, her voice lacking its usual conviction. "Standard protocol for refugee interception." But as her weapons officer began the targeting sequence, something impossible happened. The space between the two fleets began to shimmer with the same blue light that had appeared in the recordings from New Haven. A figure materialized in the void, not on either ship, but floating in the vacuum itself. Sarah Chen hung in space without any protective equipment, her small form radiating energy that their sensors couldn't classify. She wasn't alone. Dozens of other human children had appeared throughout the convoy, each one floating in the deadly vacuum as if it were a comfortable swimming pool. "Commander," the communications officer called out, her voice shaking. "We're receiving a transmission from the refugee ships. Audio only." Sarah's voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect Vorthak despite the impossibility of her survival in space. "Commander Ylves, I know you're following orders. I know you believe you're serving the greater good of your people. But before you fire those weapons, I want you to see something." The tactical display flickered and changed, showing not weapon signatures or shield strengths, but the life signs aboard each transport vessel. Ylves watched in growing horror as the readings revealed thousands of civilians, families huddled together, elderly beings helping injured children, medical personnel working desperately to keep life support systems functional. "These people have lost everything," Sarah continued, her voice somehow conveying infinite compassion despite the communications distortion. "Their homes, their loved ones, their hope for the future. All they want is to reach safety and rebuild their lives somewhere peaceful." Commander Ylves had participated in dozens of similar operations. The mathematics of war demanded that civilian casualties be treated as acceptable losses in service of strategic objectives. But now, looking at the individual life signs, seeing the fear and desperation of each refugee, she found herself questioning orders that had seemed reasonable just moments before. "You don't have to be part of this cycle," Sarah said, now appearing directly on the bridge despite the sealed atmosphere and multiple security barriers. "You can choose to be something better." The girl approached Ylves's command chair, her presence causing the ship's systems to fluctuate in ways that should have triggered emergency shutdowns. Instead, the technology seemed to become more responsive, more intuitive, as if it were learning to work in harmony with forces beyond conventional physics. "I can show you what your people could become," Sarah offered, extending one small hand toward the commander. "Not through conquest or domination, but through cooperation and growth. Would you like to see?" Against every regulation in the Coalition military code, Ylves found herself reaching out to touch the girl's hand. The moment their skin made contact, her consciousness exploded into visions of impossible beauty. She saw Vorthak colonies where her people had learned to shape matter itself, creating cities that sang with harmonic resonance. She witnessed Vorthak scientists working alongside human researchers to unlock the secrets of consciousness and reality. She experienced a future where her species' natural aggression had been transformed into passionate dedication to exploration and discovery. "This is what's possible," Sarah whispered, her voice now speaking directly into Ylves's mind. "Not just for your people, but for everyone. The Coalition doesn't have to be an instrument of conquest. It could become a force for creation, for growth, for something beautiful beyond imagination." When the vision faded, Ylves found herself changed. The anger and fear that had driven her military career for decades had been replaced by something she'd never experienced before: genuine hope for a better future. "Stand down weapons," she ordered, her voice clear and confident. "All ships, stand down weapons immediately." Her crew looked at her in confusion, but something in her tone brooked no argument. One by one, the targeting systems powered down and the weapon batteries retracted. "Commander, what are your orders?" asked her first officer. Ylves looked at the refugee convoy, then at the impossible child who stood beside her command chair. "Signal the transport ships. Tell them they have safe passage to the neutral zone. And transmit a priority message to Coalition. Command, tell them Commander Ylves requests Immediate withdrawal from human space pending diplomatic resolution. The bridge erupted in shocked protests from her officers, but Sarah raised her hand and spoke with quiet authority. Your commander has made the right choice. In doing so, she saved not just the lives of those refugees, but the future of your entire species. The girl began to fade, but her final words resonated through the ship's hull like a benediction. Tell your leaders what you've seen today, Commander. Tell them that evolution isn't something to be feared, it's something to be embraced. Meanwhile, in Coalition Command, High Admiral Zexthon received reports of similar incidents occurring throughout the war zone. Ship after ship was standing down rather than engaging human civilians. Crews were reporting transformative encounters with awakened children who offered visions of impossible futures rather than threats of destruction. But not every coalition commander was as open to change as Ylves had been. General Korthax of the siege fleet had responded to his encounter with awakened humans by ordering an immediate strike against the defenseless colony of New Geneva. His massive dreadnought and supporting vessels had opened fire on the planet's surface, determined to prove that human evolution was nothing more than psychological warfare. The orbital bombardment had lasted exactly 37 seconds before every weapon system in his fleet transformed itself into something unprecedented. Plasma cannons became generators of pure healing light. Missile launchers sprouted forests of crystalline flowers that sang with frequencies capable of mending damaged genetic codes. The dreadnought's main reactor, designed to power instruments of death, began producing energy matrices that could restore entire ecosystems. General Korthax found himself trapped aboard a ship that had become a living artwork, its corridors filled with impossible gardens and its bridge transformed into a meditation chamber, where the whispers of countless peaceful civilizations could be heard in perfect harmony. Sarah, Jen materialized before his command chair, her expression infinitely patient despite the general's attempts at violence. You tried to prove that power must be used for destruction, she said gently. Now you'll spend the rest of your life learning how power can be used for creation. Your ship will travel the galaxy healing the worlds you once conquered, and every day you'll see evidence that there's a better way to be strong. The reports reaching Coalition Command painted a clear picture. Humanity's ultimatum was not an empty threat. Every act of aggression against civilians was met with immediate transformation of the aggressors. Not death, not defeat, but something far more terrifying to military minds. The complete invalidation of everything they believed about the nature of power. As the seventh day dawned across Coalition space, High Admiral Zexthon faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization: continue the war and watch his forces transform into instruments of peace, or accept humanity's offer and discover what his species might become when evolution was embraced rather than feared. The awakened children were waiting for his answer, their impossible presence a reminder that the universe had become far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had dared to imagine. High Admiral Zexthon stood alone in his private quarters aboard the Coalition flagship Eternal Dominion, staring out at the stars that had once represented territories to be conquered. The weight of command had never felt heavier as he contemplated the decision that would reshape galactic civilization. The reports covering his desk painted a picture of military collapse unlike anything in recorded history, not through defeat in battle, but through something far more unsettling: voluntary transformation. Across Coalition space, ship commanders were choosing to stand down rather than face the awakened human children. Some crews had even begun requesting transfers to humanitarian missions, claiming they'd experienced visions of purpose during their encounters. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display activated to reveal the anxious face of General Morthak, the Brutish Confederation's representative who had been among the first to experience direct contact with the evolved humans. High Admiral, Morthak began, his massive frame somehow appearing diminished despite his intimidating appearance. I'm transmitting from the Kepler sector, where we were ordered to suppress a human research station. The operation has been complicated. The image shifted to show tactical footage of Morthak's assault fleet approaching a small scientific outpost. The station appeared defenseless, its minimal shields no match for the overwhelming firepower of Coalition warships. But as the fleet moved into attack formation, something extraordinary occurred. Children began emerging from the research station, not in evacuation pods or transport vessels, but walking directly into the vacuum of space. They moved with the casual confidence of beings for whom the laws of physics had become mere suggestions. Some appeared to be as young as 6 or 7 standard years, their small forms radiating energy that caused coalition sensors to register impossible readings. At first, we assumed they were holographic projections, Morthak continued, his voice lacking its usual aggressive confidence. But then they began speaking to us directly through our communication systems, despite having no transmitters of their own. The recording showed one particular child, a boy with bright green eyes and sandy hair, who had somehow appeared on the bridge of Morthak's flagship. The general's security officers had trained their weapons on the intruder, but the boy had simply smiled and asked a question that changed everything. "Why are you afraid?" The simple inquiry had somehow bypassed every psychological defense the trained warrior possessed. In that moment, faced with the innocent curiosity of a child who should have been terrified but instead radiated nothing but compassion, Morthak found himself examining the true motivations behind his life of conquest. "He showed me something," the general explained to Zexthon, his voice dropping to a whisper. "A vision of my homeworld as it could be. Not the harsh military compounds and weapon forges that define brutish civilization, but gardens that could feed the entire galaxy. Cities built not for war but for learning and growth. My people working alongside others to create rather than destroy." The holographic display shifted again, showing current footage of the Kepler research station. What had begun as a military target had transformed into something unprecedented, a collaborative effort involving human scientists working alongside coalition researchers who had chosen to abandon their mission of destruction. "The children offered to teach us," Morthak continued. "Not through force or coercion, but through genuine partnership. They're showing us how to unlock potential we never knew existed within our own genetic code." "Admiral, they're helping us evolve." Zexthon felt a chill run down his spine as he processed the implications. "Are you saying you've abandoned your mission, General?" "I'm saying I've found a better mission," Morthak replied firmly. "These humans aren't trying to conquer us, Admiral. They're trying to save us from ourselves. And after seeing what we could become, how can I choose destruction over transformation?" The transmission ended, leaving Zexthon alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that his military was undergoing a philosophical revolution that no amount of training or discipline could contain. His tactical advisors had warned him that continued exposure to the evolved humans would result in complete breakdown of command structure. But the evidence suggested something far more complex was occurring. A soft knock at his door interrupted his contemplation. "Enter," he called, expecting another aide with reports of spreading insubordination. Instead, Sarah Chen walked through the solid metal door as if it were empty air, her presence immediately filling the quarters with that now familiar blue luminescence. She appeared exactly as she had in every recording, a small girl in simple clothes who somehow contained the power to reshape reality itself. "Hello, Admiral," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk with the casual confidence of a diplomat rather than a child. "I thought it was time we talked privately." Zexthon's hand moved toward his personal weapon, but stopped when Sarah shook her head sadly. "Admiral, how many of your officers have tried to harm me over the past weeks? How has that worked out for them?" She was right, of course. Every attempt at violence against the awakened humans had resulted in immediate transformation of the aggressor's weapons into something harmless or helpful. Plasma rifles became medical scanners. Explosive devices turned into seeds that grew into food-producing plants, and combat armor transformed into environmental suits designed for peaceful exploration. "What do you want from me?" he asked, maintaining his military bearing despite the impossibility of the situation. Sarah leaned forward, her galaxy-deep eyes showing patience beyond her apparent years. "I want you to understand that you have a choice, Admiral. Not just for yourself, but for every species in the Coalition. You can continue this war and watch your forces transform one ship at a time. Or you can choose to embrace evolution consciously." She gestured, and the air around them shimmered with holographic images showing Coalition worlds as they currently existed. Militaristic societies built around conquest and resource extraction. Then the images shifted, revealing the same worlds transformed by the principles the awakened humans represented. Zexthon watched in fascination as Zephyrian industrial complexes became centers of artistic creation, where his people's natural mechanical aptitude was used to build wonders rather than weapons. He saw Shardani crystal farms producing materials that could enhance consciousness, rather than armor plating. Forthak aggression channeled into passionate exploration of distant galaxies rather than domination of neighboring systems. This is what's possible, Sarah explained, not through conquest but through cooperation, not through fear but through understanding. Your species don't have to abandon their nature. They just need to discover better ways to express it. And if we refuse? Zexathon asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Sarah's expression grew infinitely sad. Then you'll learn these lessons the hard way. Every act of violence will be met with transformation. Every weapon raised against innocence will become an instrument of healing. Every choice to destroy will be overridden by forces that choose to create. She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars with an expression of profound loneliness. I didn't ask for this power, Admiral. None of us did. We were just children who lost everything, and discovered that trauma can either destroy you or transform you into something beyond your wildest imagination. The other species won't accept this, Zexthon argued. They'll see it as conquest by other means, dominance disguised as evolution. Then they'll discover that dominance and evolution are mutually exclusive concepts, Sarah replied. You can't force consciousness to expand, Admiral. You can only create conditions where it chooses to grow. She began to fade, her form becoming translucent as she prepared to leave. I'm going to give you something to help with your decision, she said, extending her hand toward him. Not a vision this time, but a choice. Touch my hand and experience what your people could become, or refuse and continue as you are until circumstances force the transformation upon you. Zexathon stared at the small, glowing hand extended toward him. Everything in his military training screamed warnings about accepting gifts from the enemy. But as he looked into Sarah's eyes, he realized that the word enemy no longer applied to this situation. She wasn't offering conquest. She was offering hope. With a decision that surprised him with its clarity, the High Admiral of the Galactic Coalition reached out and touched the hand of a child who had learned to reshape reality itself. In that moment of contact, he glimpsed a future where the galaxy sang with the harmony of countless species working together to create wonders beyond imagination. When the vision faded, Admiral Zexthon knew exactly what choice he had to make. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition War Council convened under circumstances no military strategist had ever imagined. High Admiral Zexthon stood before the assembled representatives, but the traditional holographic displays showing troop movements and battle plans had been replaced by something unprecedented, real-time, feeds of coalition forces working alongside human refugees to build instead of destroy. Counselors, Zexthon began, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised even himself. I am here to formally recommend the immediate cessation of all hostile operations against human territories and the opening of diplomatic negotiations for a comprehensive peace accord. The chamber erupted in protests from multiple species simultaneously. Ambassador Quilrex's crystalline form pulsed with angry light, while General Yextar of the Serpentine Dominion hissed his disapproval. Only Unity 7 remained silent, its optical sensors focused intently on data streams that showed the continuing transformation of coalition military assets. This is surrender disguised as diplomacy, General Yextar declared, his reptilian features twisted with rage. You're asking us to capitulate to a species that violated the fundamental laws of physics to avoid defeat. Zexthon activated the central display, showing recent footage from the Kepler research station where General Morthak's forces had abandoned their assault mission. The images revealed something extraordinary. Coalition soldiers working alongside human scientists to develop new technologies that merged mechanical engineering with quantum manipulation. What you call surrender, I call evolution, Zexthon replied calmly. In the past 72 hours, we've documented advances in energy production, medical technology, and space travel that exceed our previous capabilities by orders of magnitude. The humans aren't defeating us through force, they're offering us transcendence. Ambassador Quilrex resonated with frequencies of skepticism. Transcendence? These creatures are using psychological manipulation to break down our command structure, They're turning our own people against us through some form of mental contamination. Before Zexthon could respond, the air in the chamber began to shimmer with familiar blue light. But this time Sarah Chen didn't appear alone. She materialized alongside a dozen other awakened humans, their ages ranging from young children to teenagers, each one radiating the same impossible energy that defied scientific explanation. "Ambassador," Sarah said, her voice somehow reaching each delegate in their native language. "May I address your concerns directly?" Security protocols activated immediately, but as had become the norm, the advanced containment systems simply couldn't affect the evolved humans. Energy barriers became prisms that split light into beautiful patterns, and the atmosphere itself seemed to welcome their presence. "You fear contamination?" continued a boy who appeared to be about 14, his dark skin glowing with subtle luminescence. "But what you call contamination, we call awakening. Every being in this chamber carries the same evolutionary potential we've unlocked. We're not changing you into something foreign. We're helping you become more than you already are." A girl with silver hair that floated in defiance of artificial gravity stepped forward. "General Yextar, your people's natural aggression comes from a genetic heritage designed for survival in hostile environments. But that same aggression can be transformed into passionate dedication to exploration and discovery. Would you like us to show you?" The Serpentine general recoiled instinctively, but something in the girl's expression, infinite patience combined with genuine compassion, made him hesitate. "What are you offering?" "Choice," Sarah replied simply. "The same choice we've offered everyone. You can continue to see the universe through the lens of conquest and domination, or you can discover what becomes possible when that energy is directed toward creation and growth." Unity 7's mechanical voice cut through the chamber's ambient noise with characteristic precision. "Analysis indicates that human evolutionary adaptations represent genuine advancement rather than artificial enhancement. Observed capabilities suggest access to quantum layers of reality that our technology cannot detect or manipulate." The machine intelligence projected its own holographic displays, showing detailed analyses of the transformed coalition vessels. Ships that had been converted by awakened humans weren't just functionally different, they were operating on principles that expanded the understanding of what technology could accomplish. "These vessels are not merely repurposed," Unity 7 explained. "They represent fusion of consciousness and matter that creates capabilities beyond our current theoretical frameworks. The humans are not imposing limitations, they are removing them." A teenage boy with eyes that held depths like cosmic nebulae addressed the Shardani ambassador directly. "Ambassador Quillrex, your people's crystalline physiology allows for harmonic resonance patterns that could heal damaged space-time itself. Instead of using those abilities to create better armor, you could learn to repair the quantum scars left by centuries of warfare." Quillrex's form flickered with uncertain frequencies. "Impossible. Our resonance capabilities are limited to material manipulation at the molecular level." The boy smiled and gestured toward the ambassador. "May I show you what's possible?" Before anyone could object, harmonic waves began emanating from the awakened human, but instead of affecting the ambassador directly, the resonance seemed to awaken something dormant within Quillrex's crystalline matrix. The Shardani delegate began to glow with inner light as dormant quantum pathways activated throughout their structure. For the first time in their species' recorded history, Ambassador Quillrex experienced direct perception of higher dimensional reality. The revelation was so profound that their harmonic communication shifted into frequencies that conveyed pure wonder, rather than words. "This is what we offer," Sarah explained to the mesmerized chamber. "Not conquest, not submission, but partnership in discovering what each species can become when evolution is embraced rather than feared." "Admiral," Zexthon found his voice, returning as he watched his fellow counselors grapple with experiences that challenged everything they thought they knew about the nature of existence. "The humans have demonstrated that cooperation produces results that conflict cannot achieve. I propose we establish a formal alliance based on mutual exploration of evolutionary potential." General Yextar hissed his objection, but the sound lacked his earlier conviction. "You're asking us to abandon millennia of successful military doctrine based on the promises of children who shouldn't exist. We're asking you to discover what becomes possible when children are allowed to grow up in a galaxy where war is no longer the default solution to disagreement, replied a girl whose presence seemed to make the chamber's artificial atmosphere feel more alive. She approached the Serpentine general slowly, her hands extended in a gesture of peaceful intent. Your people have been warriors for so long that you've forgotten you chose to become warriors to protect something precious. What if you could protect the entire galaxy by helping it evolve beyond the need for protection? The philosophical implications sent waves of discussion through the council chamber, as delegates struggled to process concepts that challenged their fundamental worldview. The awakened humans waited patiently, their presence a constant reminder that the universe had become far stranger and more wonderful than any military strategic plan had anticipated. If we accept this alliance, Zexthon asked, his voice carrying the weight of historical inevitability, what would be required of us? Sarah looked around the chamber, her gaze taking in each delegate with equal compassion. Simply the willingness to learn, to set aside the assumption that power must be used for domination, and discover what becomes possible when it's used for creation instead. She gestured, and the air filled with holographic images of possible futures. Coalition worlds transformed into centers of learning and growth, fleets of ships designed for exploration rather than conquest, species working together to unlock the mysteries of consciousness and reality itself. The war can end today, she said softly, not through victory or defeat, but through the recognition that there are better ways to be strong than by making others weak. The chamber fell silent, as each delegate contemplated a choice that would determine whether galactic civilization continued its cycle of conflict or evolved into something unprecedented in the known universe. The awakened children waited, their impossible presence a bridge between what had been and what could become. 5 years had passed since the signing of the Evolutionary Accord, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Captain Yilves, formerly of the Coalition military and now director of the Integrated Exploration Initiative, stood on the observation deck of the New Dawn, a vessel that perfectly embodied the cooperation between species that had once seemed impossible. The ship itself was a marvel of collaborative engineering. Zephyrian quantum manipulation systems worked in harmony with human consciousness interfacing technology, while Shardani harmonic resonance provided the structural integrity needed for faster-than-light travel through folded spacetime. Vorthak precision manufacturing had created components that could adapt to any environment, and Unity 7's digital consciousness served as the ship's AI, constantly learning and evolving alongside its biological crew. Captain, reported her first officer, a young human named Marcus Chen, Sarah's cousin, who had awakened his own abilities through peaceful meditation rather than trauma. We're approaching the coordinates where the distress signal originated. Sensors indicate an unknown vessel in critical condition. Through the viewport, Yilves could see the damaged ship drifting in the void between star systems. Its design was unlike anything in the galactic databases, suggesting it belonged to a species that had never made contact with either the former coalition or humanity. Any response to our communication attempts? She asked, her tone reflecting 5 years of experience in first contact situations that had become routine since the accord was signed. Negative, Captain, but the ship's power signature indicates life support is failing. If there are survivors aboard, they have perhaps 6 hours before atmospheric systems collapse completely. Yilves nodded, activating the ship's intercom. This is the captain. We have a potential first contact and rescue situation. All department heads to the bridge and prepare the cultural adaptation protocols. Within minutes, the bridge filled with representatives from multiple species, each bringing their unique perspectives to bear on the problem. Dr. Quilrex, the former ambassador who now served as the ship's xenocultural specialist, resonated with frequencies of anticipation while the ship's human contingent began preparing their consciousness expansion equipment for possible communication with nonverbal species. Analysis complete. Unity 7 reported through the ship's speakers. The vessel appears to be a generational ship that has suffered cascading system failures. Internal scans detect approximately 4,000 life forms of unknown configuration. Their technology suggests a civilization that developed independently of both coalition and human advancement paths. Sarah Chen materialized on the bridge, her presence now a familiar and comforting sight to crews throughout the galaxy. At 17, She had grown into her impossible abilities while maintaining the compassion that had ended a war. Her role as humanity's primary ambassador to awakening species had taken her across known space and beyond, always seeking to expand the community of evolved consciousness. "They're afraid," she said without preamble, her enhanced perceptions allowing her to sense emotional states across vast distances. "Their ship has been failing for generations and they've lost hope of ever finding a new home. They're detecting our approach but assume we're another threat rather than potential allies." Captain Ylves had learned to trust Sarah's insights completely over the years. "Can you establish communication with them?" "I can try, but they're so different from anything we've encountered that it might take time to find a common conceptual framework." Sarah's form began to glow with the familiar blue light as she extended her consciousness toward the alien vessel. "Their thought patterns are crystalline, almost musical. They communicate through harmonic vibrations that carry emotional content rather than linguistic structure." Dr. Quillrex suddenly pulsed with excited frequencies. "Musical harmonics? Captain, my people might be able to serve as translators. If their communication method is based on resonance patterns, we could establish a dialogue using Shardani harmonic protocols." "Do it," Ylves ordered, "but maintain our standard first contact procedures. No direct approach until we've established peaceful intent." The next hour became a delicate dance of communication across the vast gulf between species. Dr. Quillrex projected carefully modulated harmonic sequences toward the alien ship while Sarah provided emotional context through her expanded consciousness. Gradually, tentative responses began to emerge from the damaged vessel. "They call themselves the Symphonic Collective," Dr. Quillrex reported, their harmonic communication now carrying undertones of wonder. "They're a nomadic species whose homeworld became uninhabitable 3,000 years ago. They've been searching for a new planet ever since. But their ship is dying and they lack the technology to repair the damage." Marcus Chen looked up from his consciousness interface console, his eyes showing the distant focus that indicated he was processing information on multiple dimensional levels. "Sarah, I'm detecting something else about them. They're not just afraid, they're resonating with harmonic patterns that suggest dormant evolutionary potential similar to what we've awakened in other species." Sarah's expression shifted to one of profound recognition. They're on the verge of their own transformation. The crisis they're facing isn't just technological, it's evolutionary. Their species is ready to transcend their current limitations, but they need guidance to avoid the trauma-based awakening that humans experienced. "Captain." Ylves felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had defined her life since abandoning military conquest for exploration and growth. "Can we help them?" "More than help them," Sarah replied, her form beginning to phase shift as she prepared to project herself across space. "We can offer them exactly what the galaxy offered us, the chance to evolve consciously rather than through suffering." The rescue operation that followed became a masterpiece of cooperative engineering and consciousness expansion. While Zephyrian engineers worked to stabilize the alien ship's failing systems, Human Awakened guided the Symphonic Collective through meditative practices that activated their dormant evolutionary capabilities. Shardani harmonic resonance provided the communication framework that allowed for complex technical and philosophical exchanges. Within 72 hours, the dying generational ship had been transformed into something unprecedented, a living vessel that existed in perfect harmony with its inhabitants' consciousness. The Symphonic Collective discovered that their species' ability to communicate through harmonics could be expanded to interface directly with matter itself, allowing them to heal and reshape their environment through pure intention. "Captain," Unity 7 reported with what sounded like satisfaction in its synthetic voice, "the Symphonic Collective has requested permission to join the Evolutionary Accord. They wish to contribute their harmonic manipulation abilities to the continued expansion of galactic consciousness." Ylves smiled, remembering her own transformation from military destroyer to cooperative explorer. "Signal the Council of Awakened Species. Tell them we've found another family to join our growing community." As the new dawn and the transformed symphonic vessel prepared to travel together toward the galactic core where the Council maintained its ever-expanding headquarters, Sarah stood on the observation deck looking out at stars that no longer represented territories to be conquered, but opportunities for growth and discovery. "How many more are out there?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. Millions, Sarah replied, her consciousness touching briefly on the vast network of awakened beings that now spanned multiple galaxies. Every species in the universe carries the potential for transcendence. Every conflict is an opportunity for transformation. Every moment of crisis can become a moment of evolution. She gestured toward the stars, her enhanced perception revealing the quantum threads that connected all conscious life throughout the cosmos. The war didn't end when the Coalition chose peace, Marcus. It transformed into something better, a continuous process of growth and discovery that includes everyone willing to embrace change. The two ships entered hyperspace together, carrying their mixed crews toward a future where the phrase, "humanity fuck yeah," had evolved into something more profound. Consciousness fuck yeah. A celebration not of human superiority, but of the unlimited potential that existed within every being brave enough to choose evolution over stagnation. In the transformed galaxy, children like Sarah were no longer created through trauma and loss. Instead, they emerged naturally as their species learned to embrace change as an opportunity, rather than a threat. The cycle of violence that had once defined galactic civilization had been broken, replaced by an ever-expanding spiral of growth, discovery, and consciousness that reached toward possibilities beyond imagination. The war was over. The real adventure had just begun.